You probably don't need these books. In fact, most magicians probably shouldn't even bother. Before you second guess yourself, yes, I'm talking about the Magic of Johnny Thompson books. After all, this 2-volume hardback set, which is about 660 pages and over 1,100 photographs, will set you back $250. And as we know, in today's world, that isn't cheap. But there are absolutely valid reasons why you might want these books and something you might get out of them. So in this episode of Erudite Magic, I'd like to talk that over with you. A couple of disclaimers to get out of the way up top. The first is that these books are now owned and published by Vanishing Ink, my employer. So I have a vested interest in getting you to buy these, which is why I thought that I might explain that these books aren't going to be for most people. But if you like to talk about magic books, and you'd like a little peek as to what's inside of these and how maybe you could benefit from them, then keep watching. But I want you to know up front that I work for the company who reprinted these books. While we're talking about Vanishing Ink and the republication, these were originally put out by Magicana, David Ben's charity organization, and this version is basically identical to the old one with the exception of the Vanishing Ink logo on the spine. I was particularly excited to see these books come back into print because if you'll recall, I did an episode probably over a year ago where I discussed some of my top books to reprint, and the Magic of Johnny Thompson made that list, and now that it has been reprinted, I'm finally able to add it to my collection. But the question is, was it worth the wait, and would I encourage you to pick these up? Now, I assume that most of you will know who Johnny Thompson was, but in case you don't, let me make a brief introduction. Johnny Thompson was one of the most well-loved magicians in the world, and for good reason. Along with his wife Pam, they made up the Great Thompsonian Company, which was a two-person, mostly silent act performed to music, involving doves and comedy. Well, you'll have to pick up the book to read all about it or watch some clips on YouTube. Anyway, Johnny was more than just a two-person act. He also did close-up, trade shows, and consulted with a lot of different magics. He was one of the most knowledgeable and creative minds in all of magic. For years, he served as a consultant for Penn and Teller, including his work as a producer on Penn and Teller Fool Us. So with all of these accolades and all of the love that he typically gets from magicians around the world, why would I say that you don't need these books? Here's why. Most of the magic that you're going to find in the Magic of Johnny Thompson are either his takes on a traditional classic of magic, like a Triumph, a Coins Through the Table, Cups and Balls, the Invisible Deck, or some of his work that he was very well known for that you'll likely never perform. Items like his Dove production and that portion of his act. So if you're the type of magician who is really looking to learn new tricks and wants a ton of magic explained to them in a book, then you're probably going to be disappointed with a set of books like the Magic of Johnny Thompson, which in spite of their size, are not the most densely packed books full of tricks. The books, of course, are written by Jamie Ian Swiss, who was a close friend of Johnny Thompson and certainly is not known for his brevity. So many of the write-ups in these books are somewhat lengthy, and that might appeal to you. Certainly almost everything is described completely, including Johnny's scripting and comedy bits and all of those kinds of things that you would normally expect in a magic book. However, there are some items in here that don't particularly have a lot of description, most notably the illusions section, which contains 4 different illusions in just 8 pages. If you look at the cost of this book and divide it by the number of tricks in the book, you're paying a pretty high price per trick. But that's not really why you buy a book like this. And indeed, I think that there are some of you who will find tremendous value within these pages. I just don't think that it's going to be for everyone. In my opinion, the real reason that you buy a book like this is so that you can study one of the great practitioners of our art. I have long talked about how much I enjoy lifetime magic books, and I don't think that it gets any more exciting than a lifetime of magic through the eyes of Johnny Thompson, which is what you're getting in this 2-volume set. Sure, Johnny did a lot of classics of magic because he learned from a lot of the great ones. As you read through this book, you'll find out some of his history in magic. When he was just a kid, he came into contact with J.B. Bobo through one of his friends. And as you read through the rest of the book, you'll see how he met so many of the top performing magicians from the 1940s all the way into the 2000s. And all the time he was learning, practicing, working, plying his craft. He started off as a musician and transitioned into a full-time magic performer. The books themselves are broken down into different categories, and a lot of these categories are tied to what I just referenced, the people that Johnny Thompson met and learned from, and the types of tricks that he learned from their repertoire. But more than that, you're getting how he made these pieces his own, and even some advice on how to do that for yourself. The author gives you the advice to learn a Johnny Thompson trick and do it exactly as he says to do it, including using the script as much as is applicable to you in your first few performances. After you start to get comfortable with all of the sleights and the talking that you're going to do and everything starts to come a little more naturally, now you can start to put your own spins on this just like Johnny did. In this first volume, you'll learn tricks that Johnny learned from greats like Harry Reiser, Ed Marlowe, Charlie Miller, and Cardini. In the second book will pick up where the first one left off. There'll be some coin magic. You'll see what he learned from Di Vernon. There's some mentalism that Johnny performed, the aforementioned illusions, but then the author will break down the Great Thompsonian Company complete act, as well as Johnny Thompson's trade show act with all of the pieces that make that up. Frankly, I found that there was a lot to love in those last two sections of the book. You're not only learning the tricks, there's also a description of each one of those acts, and you're starting to see some of the choices that he made, both for artistic and practical reasons. And this is where the real gold of a book like this is, to be able to get into the mind of a great of magic, someone who poured blood, sweat, and tears into their magic act and spent countless hours refining techniques to now share them with you as if they were sitting right there with you to mentor you. One of the most powerful things that a book can do. This video is being brought to you by Don's Magic and Books. If you're one of the people who's interested in the Magic of Johnny Thompson, then great news. Don does have these on his website available for order, and they qualify for free shipping if you live in the United States. But whether or not you're looking for the Magic of Johnny Thompson, my suggestion is that you check out all of the other possibilities that Don has on his website. He's constantly getting in gently used and rare books that I'm sure you'll find interesting and want to add to your magic library. Most of the time these books don't last very long because he offers them at such great deals. So whether you're looking for something new or used, shop with the sponsor of this video, Don's Magic and Books. Am I going to perform the Great Thompsonian Company act? No. In fact, one of the introductions to the books is written by Teller. He shares the story of how him and Teller thought it would be great to carry on the Great Thompsonian Company act into the future by performing it themselves with the assistance of their crew. But even they quickly realized how difficult it would be to completely duplicate this magic of the Great Thompsonian. But the important part is that there are lessons to be learned, nuggets of wisdom, ways to approach the art of magic that you'll find within the tricks and around what he's teaching you to do. Now, with all of that said, you're still going to be able to learn all of these tricks, and there are a lot of them. The book is mostly cards, but there's certainly a lot of other magic as well, items with coins and silks and doves. As a mentalist, I was particularly interested in the mentalism section of this book, which has a few really great pieces. One of those is a mental epic style routine, which if you're not familiar with, the performer makes 3 predictions based on 3 different things that the audience says, and at the end it's revealed he knew exactly what they were thinking. To anyone who's studied this, it's not really a surprise that the method is what we call one ahead. But the inherent weakness of this trick is always that third prediction. It's usually the weakest of the 3, but Johnny Thompson managed to find something that turned it into one of the strongest of the 3. And he did it in a way that suited his character and style. So while you might learn to do the routine exactly as he teaches it, more importantly, you'll see how if you put a little more creativity, a little more thinking, and do a little more research by reading books like this, then you too can come up with a bespoke piece of magic that fits your character and your needs. Let's talk a little bit about the value proposition of these books. I've already mentioned that they're $250. The originals, I believe, were $300, and I think those were signed. Of course, these ones are not, since Johnny Thompson passed away a number of years ago, but the content is otherwise identical to the previous versions. For most of you watching, I know you love to learn new magic tricks, and I don't think that this is going to fit the bill for you. But if you're the kind of person who loves lifetime magic books, to study the rich history of how someone got into magic, their story, progression, the acts that they put together, why they structured things the way they did, reading through the Great Thompsonian Company act, as documented here by Jamie Ian Swiss, is a masterclass in how to put together an act for an audience. And the fact that it was done more or less silently simply adds to the credit that I give Johnny Thompson for the level of thinking that he put into this act. If you're willing to put the work into studying it, taking notes, and learning how to think better as a magician, then that's where you're going to get the real value out of this. Whether you're a close-up magician, a corporate performer, or someone who has aspirations to be on a larger stage, I certainly think there's something for everyone within the pages of these 2 volumes. I never had the pleasure of meeting Johnny, but from what I understand through both reading these books and talking to people who knew him, he was the rare person who was not only broad in his knowledge, but also deep. He was a jack of all trades and the master of all. I did get my wish that these books were reprinted, and for that, I'm very grateful. I'm hoping that if you were looking for them to be reprinted, you'll find value in the fact that it is $50 less than it used to be, and there's a lot of really great items to study in its pages. But if you're one of those people that I mentioned this really isn't for you, then maybe you'll prefer one of the more affordable lifetime books that I detailed out in this discussion here. As always, my friends, I appreciate you watching, and until next time, keep reading.